Hey everybody. So I'm here to talk about this book titled MBS. That stands for Mohammed bin Salmon. Mohammed bin Salman is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, which means he's second in line to the throne. So once the current King Salman, his father, once King Salman either abdicates the throne or passes away, then MBS will take over. And he's only like 35, 36 years old right now, and so he could rule for decades ahead. This book, MBS, was written by this gentleman, Ben Hubbard. He has spent more than a dozen years reporting in the Middle East, where he is the Beirut bureau chief for the New York Times. So, it was a very interesting book. I just finished reading it, and I'll read a few excerpts from it. The bottom line is, in many ways, MBS is opening up the kingdom. Relaxing the rule that banned women from driving, so women can drive now, and then, undoing the ban on movie theaters. So he wants movie theaters. He's making all kinds of changes that would be considered very good, but while at the same time he's consolidating power, he's going to become the most powerful king ever when he becomes king, because he pretty much controls everything. In Saudi Arabia's history, they would have, this Al Saud family is huge, and they would have different princes that would control their different areas, but he's kind of taking on everything, from the economy to the military to intelligence. He controls pretty much everything. So I'll read a few excerpts from the book. First, to give you an idea what kind of person. And I was going to mention, so as on top of consolidating power of pretty much controlling everything, he's also becoming more, he's very ruthless. People are afraid to get on social media and say anything against the government. They're afraid of their phones being hacked by the government and being jailed. He's got both ends of the spectrum. He's opening up society and relaxing their freedoms, but at the same time, you have to be careful how you exercise those freedoms, because he could come down on you pretty hard. So MBS one instance, MBS wanted a piece of land that a cleric businessman didn't want to sell, so MBS sent him an envelope with a bullet in it. This is an incident that happened years ago. The king at the time, King Abdullah, scolded MBS's dad, Prince Salman, to fix this. MBS locked his and then on another instance, MBS locked his own mother and her two sisters in a palace and lied to his dad, King Salman, about it. Also, King Salman had an incident, in recent memory. He pretty much jailed all the prominent businessmen and many prominent princes in the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in his drive to alleviate corruption out of Saudi Arabia. But at the same time that he's cutting down on corruption, he himself bought a super yacht called Serene, and it's 440 feet long. Now, to compare that to a football field in an NFL stadium, and NFL football field is 100 yards or 300 feet long, so this is 440 feet. So this would be the equivalent of 146 yards. So almost 1.5 times the length of a football field. He bought this yacht for $456 million, and he bought it from a vodka Russian tycoon named Yuri Shefter. His dad, King Salmon, also lived large. He once vacationed in the south of France with an entourage of over 1,000 people, and then they moved on to Morocco. MBS bought a 30,000-acre game ranch in South Africa with double-layered electric fence and land allocated for 20 villas and runways fit for 747 planes. MBS himself has a 747 personal plane. In 2015, he bought a $300 million French chateau, which at the time was the most expensive home in the world, and he bought a Leonardo da Vinci painting for $450 million. And that Leonardo da Vinci painting was called the Salvator Mundi. Again, he bought it for $450 million. And he said, it's to increase their art scene. They, quite a while ago, opened a new museum, and that was going to become, from what I read in the past, that was going to become a centerpiece and to attract visitors. But that's just kind of odd, though, that he's jailing these people, and basically what he did is, you want out of jail, you're going to give us back this much money. And he apparently recouped, they said, $106 billion for the kingdom from these people. But at the same time, he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars on personal purchases for himself. At a dinner at John Kerry's mansion in Maryland, MBS said he could determine who ruled where in the Arab world. He said, if I want Sisi out, he'll be out. And that's referring to the Egyptian president at the time. So this kind of attitude personally concerns me, because he seems to be kind of a trust fund baby that was never disciplined, and now he's like a little child with his own country as his toy. So it just doesn't seem like a very good path forward. Now, also in this book, MBS made the decision by himself to launch a military campaign in Yemen. He did not coordinate with the two main security services. One of those is the Saudi National Guard, which was led by Prince Mutib bin Abdallah, who was in the United Arab Emirates when it started. So that's another thing that concerns me, is he doesn't, it seems like in many situations he doesn't need to consult with anyone, that he just knows everything, and he's the genius of the world. I do think it's good that he's opening up the country and relaxing certain rules, but at the same time, he's at the other end of the spectrum. He's very ruthless, and I'll get to more of that. There's a few more excerpts from this book I'll read that gets more into that. On June 20th, 2015, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef. Okay, so I want to give context to this. Now, the title Crown Prince means you're second in line to the throne. You have the King of Saudi Arabia and then the Crown Prince. And once the King of Saudi Arabia either abdicates the throne or he dies, then the Crown Prince immediately becomes the king. Now, the Crown Prince at the time was Mohammed bin Nayef. And so Mohammed bin Salman, he was below Mohammed bin Nayef. He was one notch below Mohammed bin Nayef. But MBS wanted to be the Crown Prince. So this just, what I'll tell you next, if this happened in America, it would be considered insane. So on June 20th, 2015, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, also known as MBN, was told the king wanted to see him. So he flew in a helicopter to the king's palace in Safa. He was tricked, and a team of royal guards stripped him and his bodyguards of their guns and cell phones, and MBN, Mohammed bin Nayef, was held in a room all night. Now, MBS, MBS is, I have to keep showing you the different ones because it can be confusing. So MBS was holding MBN, and Mohammed bin Nayef. And MBS's aides pressured Mohammed bin Nayef to abdicate as crown prince. They threatened to publicize his medical problems and out him as a drug addict. MBS tricked the Allegiance Council's members. The Allegiance Council can vote, on, the Crown Prince. So MBS tricked the council members and played recorded calls that were to MBN. They played recorded calls to MBN that they agreed to MBS becoming Crown Prince. So he tricked the 31 of the 34 council members that they would agree to that Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, should be Crown Prince, and he played these calls to MBN. So he was tricking both the council and MBN, and the phone call said that they agreed to MBS becoming Crown Prince. MBN was also deprived of food and his diabetes medication. He finally gave in to he finally gave in, and he abdicated the throne. MBS's guards drove him to his palace in Jeddah and put him under house arrest. So again, MBS basically tricked the council that can vote on who's going to be the Crown Prince. And they played these calls. So they tricked the council, and then they tricked Mohammed bin Nayef with these calls, but he didn't abdicate and give up until he got too hungry and he was deprived of his diabetes medication. Now see, this is insane. That would be like the president in this country doing this to the vice president. This is insane. So then Mohammed bin Salman became the Crown Prince. Now, that is how this guy became Crown Prince, and he's going to rule Saudi Arabia for several decades after the current king is gone. And that's the kind of person he is. Kidnapping his predecessor in abdicating the throne so he could take it, and then also earlier on in his life sending an envelope with a bullet to a cleric because that cleric did not want to sell him his land. That'd be like someone wanting to buy someone else's house, and if they didn't want to sell it to them, then you would send them an envelope with a bullet in it. I mean, this is who's going to rule that country. Now, Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was critical of Trump during the campaign, so after he won, MBS had his deputy Sal al-Qahtani call Khashoggi and tell him that he was banned from tweeting, writing, and speaking to the media. Now, MBS had ordered al-Qahtani and his organization, the Rapid Intervention Group, to target his opponents domestically and abroad, sometimes with violence, according to the Central Intelligence Agency. They would engage in surveillance, harassment, and kidnapping of Saudi citizens overseas. They would also sometimes be tortured inside palaces belonging to MBS and his father, the king. Prime Minister Saad Hariri of Lebanon was kidnapped and forced to read a resignation letter on TV from MBS's palace. So again, the Prime Minister Saad Hariri was in Saudi Arabia, and he was basically kidnapped and held in MBS's palace until he read his resignation on TV, which is crazy. That'd be like the president of this country kidnapping another foreign leader that would come here and make them resign via live television. Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who's probably the most prominent investor from Saudi Arabia, well, this is a side note. This is such a bizarre thing I read in the book. I just had to read it. So Prince Al-Walid is one of the most prominent and wealthy businessmen from Saudi Arabia, and according to the book, he kept a group of dwarfs in his entourage because he thought they were funny to look at. So I guess that's how much money this guy has. He can do that. But I just thought that was one of the more bizarre things I read in the book. Now, MBS snapped at an advisor who said they should come up with a street plan for Neom. Now, MBS wants to build a $500 billion city in the desert of Saudi Arabia called Neom, N-E-O-M. I forget what that's an acronym for, but he wants to spend $500 billion building this city being run by robots. And when an advisor told him we should come up with a street plan for the city, he snapped at him and said, "We don't need streets, we're going to have flying cars by 2030. That's in a decade." Now, this also makes me question his intelligence. I mean, he's just like a child with, this country as his toy, because that's just not realistic. First of all, he wants to spend an obscene amount of money, $500 billion, to build this city, and many advisors said, why don't you go to existing cities and upgrade the existing cities? But he is like a child, and I want to build Neom, this brand new city with robots and flying cars. That just sounds insane to me. So anyways, again, that's MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. It's a very interesting book written by Ben Hubbard, the Beirut bureau chief for the New York Times. I just think, again, one hand, he's doing good things to open up freedoms for the citizens, but at the same time, he's taking away other freedoms. And in some ways, they're living in more fear. They're even afraid to talk on the phones. And he's just, I don't really think he's fit to run a country for several decades. But we'll see what happens. But this is a great, if you want to find out more about Mohammed bin Salman, this is the book to do it. Thank you very much.